Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of the Ordinary Sacred, and we are in a new camp spot today. And today I'm really excited to share with you more about Derek Scott's book titled Dead, Spoiler Alert. Now, if you know about Derek Scott, you may have watched some of his wonderful YouTube videos. He has many wonderful teaching videos on internal family systems, and his personality just shines through. Um, I have never met Derek in person. Parts of me are saying, well, actually, I have, because I have met him many times since he's passed. And um, the news of his passing was actually very jolting to my system because it came as a shock. And it felt like a teacher, a beloved teacher, had passed. And so there was a lot of grief in my system. And ironically, it was Derek himself and his teaching about working with grieving parts that really helped me process that loss. And Derek gave so many gifts at the very end of his life. He made a video, to all the people out in YouTube land, and through that explained that he was graduating to become an ancestor that we could call on. And so that is what I do. That is what I've done. And I've interacted with him numerous times since his passing. And so, in many ways, feel more connected to him even now. And I've found out since, it's so fascinating because I would constantly send people to Derek and IFS Canada because I had such held him in such high regard and had heard such wonderful things about IFS Canada, and then would send people there and they would report wonderful things. So I was constantly referring people to him. And I found out after he passed, many people who started coming to my groups came because Derek recommended they do so. And so he knew me from my YouTube videos, and I knew him through his YouTube videos. And so it might be kind of like, you're watching me and you feel like you know me because I was explaining to my husband that while I'm making this video, I'm actually by myself, which means that I am my most authentic. It's really, really important to me to be by myself because if there's any other person around, that's harder for me to do. Even though there are hundreds of people watching on the other end, they're not here in this moment. And so it's easier for me to be authentic. And then it's easier for you to get to know the authentic me. And I think that was the same for Derek. I feel like I really got to know him, and you may have as well through his videos, just like you know me through my videos. And so this book, unfortunately, I cannot do a giveaway because as soon as it came out on Kindle, I read it on Kindle, and I don't actually have the physical book. But I'm going to go through lots of things about the book. This is more than a book review to me. It's a life review, and it's also about my experience with my inner family and how they reacted to a lot of the things that Derek talked about in the book. I had a lot of activation in my system, and I had parts who were saying, don't talk about those things, Christine. You don't want to shed any kind of negative light on Derek's legacy. But in consulting with Derek, he was very supportive. He said, Christine, this is the gift that you have for the world is to be authentic and show the relationship that you have with your parts. So if parts came up and you interacted with them from the book, that's what you need to share. And the truth is, I myself, who's not a part, have worked with a lot of those parts, and Derek has as well. So I'm going to tell you how I had questions reading the book, and then I would go to Derek and he would meet concerns of certain parts. Um, and stay tuned to the end. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite things about an interaction between Derek and Dick Schwartz, in the book. And then finally, I'm going to tell you at the end something that happened just now as Brian and I were kind of talking about Derek's book and about this video. Okay, so first I'm going to just show you an image since I don't have the book. Um, I'm just going to show you an image of the book so you can see it. And I'll go ahead, even though I'm not going to be on the screen very long, I'll make myself bigger here. Um, so this is the cover of the book. It's called Dead, spoiler alert, which is just so Derek. Oh my gosh, the whole book is so Derek, but it really is this trickster kind of cheeky attitude, right? To even kind of be joking in death and the way so it's Dead, spoiler alert, a psychotherapist's journey with cancer. And then he writes Derek Scott, RSW inactive, which again is just this humor that Derek had. Um, Dark humor, some might say. But I'm going to come down here to what I guess Healthable has as the synopsis of the book because it's it's a pretty good summary, and I'm going to talk more about my own personal reactions to it. But it says a psychotherapist with terminal cancer approaches the end of his life with the understanding that he is being called home and that cancer is the body's response to the call to facilitate the journey. How he came to the realization is documented as a journey starting when he discovered internal family systems, IFS therapy, and medicine work in the same year, 20 years before his diagnosis. The book jumps from journal entries from his last day to his first meeting with IFS founder Dr. Richard Schwartz and the transformation that results. Later that same year, he is guided to, it says medical work, but I think it means medicine work, by healing the distress that parts hold in his system and experiencing profound healing with various medicines. His understanding of the psycho-spiritual nature of being becomes clear. He faces the end of his time here with equanimity, transitioning to becoming an ancestor. So that's a great little synopsis of the book that I would say is accurate. Let's see. So, I have notes here because I want to make sure that I do justice and explain everything. Um, so I, when I first heard that the book was out, I really wanted to read it. And it's fascinating because, like I said, Derek's death came as a shock to me and I think to many people in the IFS community because parts of him really hid his terminal diagnosis pretty well, and only shared it with very close friends, which I respect, so that he didn't necessarily have to placate the parts of lots and lots of people who were grieving while he was going through his own process. But what he did that was so generous is during the last 3 months of his life, he wrote this book and was so candid about his own journey at the end there. And so even though it was shocking, I feel like I have an inside look at what was going on inside of him and in his relationships that you don't often get with someone, in the last months of their life. So it's really, I have parts who are just so grateful for that. I often will say that my love language is information. And so just having those tidbits of like personal information from him just feels, again, like such a gift. So I loved just the beginning of the book. Michelle Glass writes a foreword and this really beautiful, and Mel Gelbreth, the person that he basically passed the torch of IFS Canada to, writes this really beautiful synopsis of what internal family systems is. And then the publisher writes something that kind of explains that this genre of a book is really like nothing he had ever experienced before, and it's kind of like the trickster or the wise fool genre, which really does describe Derek so well. Um, I think is it no Nostradine? Is that the name of the wise fool? There's in some Muslim traditions. If you get a chance to read some of those books, those are great. But it's kind of like that. And in that way, Derek didn't take himself very seriously. He didn't take life and pain, and in a wonderful way, he didn't take it too seriously. He always had a lightness about him, even in some of the darkest times. So I really love the way the book is organized. My system loved it because it keeps you really engaged because it's constantly skipping kind of from one story to another, one time to another, from when he was first meeting Dick Schwartz and Internal Family Systems and that retreat, and then when he first experienced plant medicine. I think I'm not sure if it was ayahuasca or a psychedelic, something like that, and his kind of journey along with that. And then also the last year or so of his life from when he got his cancer diagnosis to his death. And so he's weaving all of this in and out through journal entries, through text messages with a good friend. And it felt very engaging. Like I really wanted to follow each story and figure out, what was going to happen. And it was just so Derek. I mean, it was so his voice that I felt like as I read it, I could hear him saying everything in the book. So it just felt like spending time with Derek, I think. Um, okay. So I mentioned that as I read the book, I had lots of parts that had reaction. And so I want to share those with you because just as an example, just to be open and authentic about what it looks like when you're reading a book or watching a show or something happens in your life and there are parts that come up that feel distressed or feel, on the edge of their comfort zone, or get activated in some way, right? And what that looks like. So the big three things that were really hard for my system in reading Derek's book were his continual talk of using the plant medicines, and he has different names for different plant medicines. I can't remember the exact terms, but he'll call one soma, um, which might be, I can't remember what one is marijuana, one is like a psychedelic, but there's one that's soma, one that's heart, and I think there's another one. So there were kind of three main medicines that he would use, and he would use those terms. Um, and the two other things that my system had reaction to, and one was he tells a story about basically having this experience with plant medicine and then wanting to have it again and again and joining this group um, that would meet regularly and do these kind of plant medicine ceremonies. And my system, so he didn't say this, my system called it a cult, a quote unquote cult. And so I have some religious trauma and different things. And so it was very hard for my system to um, accept or wrap my head around, oh, Derek, it was in a cult that, what? It felt kind of shocking to my system. And then the third thing was this decision to use in Canada what's called MAID, MAID, medical assistance in dying. And so I had a lot of parts that were kind of pushed to the edge of my comfort zone just with the fact that Derek chose to do that because I had parts saying, but some people have miraculous healings. And what if he would have been healed and he took himself from us, you know, um, too early, or he's playing God, all of these kind of culturally burdened parts that have learned that that's a very taboo thing, right? So I had parts come up around that as well. And um and so it was so fascinating. I remember being in the middle of reading his book and I woke up in the middle of the night and I had all these parts really active and just really distressed. And I asked them what's wrong, and they were saying, I just wish that he didn't talk about all these things that are kind of outside of the mainstream because then people aren't going to take him seriously. And so their fear was if he does these things that are considered crazy, right? Um, then people won't take his message about internal family systems and about healing seriously. And in connecting with him, his response seemed to be, it's okay, Christine. I want to be completely authentic. And it's important. That's very important to me. And just like I'm working through my parts as they react, it gives other people who have any kind of reaction an opportunity to work through those parts. So it's all good. You cannot get it wrong, which myself knows to absolutely be true. Um, okay, and then so the concern that my parts had about the plant medicine is really interesting. So Derek actually meets some of the concerns in the book because he has, I think, two chapters that are devoted to explaining the differences between certain medicines. For example, he talks about certain medicines like alcohol and cocaine, or like that take you out of the present and kind of numb you, versus what he used, which he would say enhanced and enlivened his understanding of the present. And that like the effect is was very different, and that sometimes people conflate the two types of, and probably more than two, but those two types of drugs. And then you know, it's interesting. He tells a story about the war on drugs in the United States, and how he understands how, in essence, the war on drugs actually created a lot of young drug addicts because maybe they had experimented with marijuana and they understood that, you know, it didn't feel that dangerous to them. And but when on the war on drugs, they're putting marijuana and heroin and you know all these other uh, big drugs all together, the person says, "Oh, well, if they're saying they're so dangerous, and I've tried marijuana and that didn't seem so dangerous, I might as well try these others as well." And so he talks about how dangerous that is to equate them all, which helped some of my parts. And you know, it's been years that I have agreed with the legalization of marijuana, and have um, I've heard lots of people who have experienced psychedelics talk about their experience, and it sounds identical. I mean, so close to what I experience using internal family systems in my inner family, that I feel so supportive of it because it feels like it's this portal to allow people's systems to or their protectors to relax a little bit, have access to self, and work with their exiles. So I think it can be a really helpful tool to helping people do inner healing work. So it's not that my parts necessarily had a problem with that, but there was this question in my system because I have often felt like um, I've never personally done psychedelics. Oh, I was going to say this too. What I realized was happening was that my system has been so dominated by managers. Um, and so my managers were having a reaction to what they perceived as Derek's firefighters, right? Drug users, um, being in this cult and cult, quote unquote cult, and the medical assistants in dying, my managers are like, that's a suicidal part, right? And so they've learned that like these are socially shameful. These are bad. Oh my gosh, there's so much discomfort around that. People aren't going to take him seriously. Um, so my managers were really kind of pointing at what they were calling his firefighters and having a reaction to it. Um, but what I was going to say about so my parts had this understanding that I've never done psychedelics, but when people talk about psychedelics, they are explaining the exact thing that I experience when I do internal family systems on my own system. And so I thought they must, maybe they need the psychedelics to open themselves up to IFS, one or two sessions, but then their system is opened up to the self, and now they can do IFS. They don't have to rely on the psychedelics. And I knew that Derek knew IFS and loved IFS and taught IFS and was passionate about IFS. So my system was saying, I don't understand. Why did he continue to need the psychedelics if he had IFS? Right? So that was kind of the question that my parts were posing. And so a wonderful thing happened where not too long ago, there was a gathering of people to celebrate Derek, and it was the year anniversary of his death. And Seth Copalt led an incredibly beautiful meditation where we gave our grief. We went to the ocean and we gave our grief to the ocean. And as I was in that meditation, I asked Derek to come and be with me. And he was there right on the beach. And he held my hand as we looked out into the ocean. And I asked him, just very vulnerably and honestly, I said, my parts don't understand why you had to continue to use plant medicine when you had IFS. And he was just so, his aura, his spirit was just so calm and joyful, which is how he is every time. I've interacted with him as an ancestor numerous times, and he's always that way, just kind of smiling ear to ear and feels like delighted in me. And he said, I use the plant medicine to help me see beyond the veil, is the word that he used. And it was kind of like we were looking out at the ocean and like the sky parted and you could see the vastness of unconditional love, right? And he was saying the plant medicine really was a tool to help me connect to the reality of the vastness of unconditional love that we are all held in, and to connect to my guides and my ancestors and all cap self. It really helped me be able to do that. And I said, but I feel like I'm able to do that without plant medicine. And Derek looked at me, I'm going to get emotional. And he said, I know, Christine, that is so wonderful. That is such a gift that you have. And I'm trying to remember the exact words he used, but he encouraged me. He said, don't waste that gift. He said, go into your system and meet with your parts and connect to the unconditional love that is there, because not everyone is able to do that. And I've often struggled with that. I've thought if I can do it, then anybody can do it, right? Am I special? Am I not? And it was like this very beautiful affirmation. Yes, Christine, you have a gift. So it was like, I am me, and there's no shame that I needed these psychedelics at times. And there's no shame in you not needing them. This is a beautiful gift. Use it. It just felt so, it met all my concerns. I felt very connected to Derek. I felt very connected to self. My parts concerns were met. It was just a really beautiful connection. Um, and I have a part to say, I could tell you stories of other times when I've met with Derek. There was one time where wasn't sure what to do about my quote unquote business, or, what to do with meeting with clients or groups or different things like that. And I had parts that were really angsty about it, and I got to do the right thing. And so I met with Derek in this beautiful um, cherry orchard garden inside that was really peaceful. And I was kind of asking him for wisdom as an ancestor. And he just smiled at me, kind of chuckled, and he said, "Oh, Christine, you know that it's not about what you do, it's about who you are." And he just spoke directly to the truth that myself knew, and my parts relaxed. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, we cannot get it wrong. We don't need to worry." And he said something like, "You could do this, or you could do that, or you could do something else. It doesn't matter. You cannot get it wrong." And I know that, that's the message that I get from self when I am connected, to that source of love, is what a lot of people get when they have near-death experiences. You're unconditionally loved. There's nothing to fear. You cannot get it wrong. And that's kind of repeatedly what I feel like Derek says to me when my parts seek his wisdom. And so that's kind of confirmation to me that he's, one with self now. Not that he wouldn't have said that when he was in the flesh as well. Um, I'm trying to look at my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Okay, yes. So just two last things. I have been saying this repeatedly the last few weeks, so you might have heard me say this already because this has been so profound to my system. It may or may not be to yours, okay? But in Derek's book, there are several interactions that he has with Dick Schwartz that are just, again, to me, really reflect Dick and his personality as well. There's one where he's at a conference and someone else is trying to do IFS with Derek, and I think it's a inner critic or a part that's just badgering him on the inside, and the person doesn't know what to do. So they call Dick over, "Can you help?" And Dick just comes over and says really nonchalantly, matter of factly, "Oh yeah, that's a critter. Just just tell them that you don't want them to be there." And the so critter is what Dick used to call an unattached burden. And so it's the fascinating hearing Derek talk about his exchanges with Dick, particularly um, about things that are not parts, kind of are part of the spiritual realm, right? And so they talk quite a bit also about their guides, these beautiful, perhaps ancestors or spirits who are beyond the veil, right? Who are not currently in these flesh suits on the earth. And Dick was saying that, uh, and I don't know if I'm going to get the exact words, but the essence of what he was saying is that the two most common messages he gets from guides are one, that the ultimate reality of the universe is unconditional love. And there's just a knowing, an affirmation of that. That is just the truth, capital T truth. The ultimate reality of everything is unconditional love. And the second thing is that these guides really express to Dick that life in these bodies on this planet are very difficult, that the earth is a very difficult school to be in. And my system has found so much comfort in that because these two things are simultaneously true. And my system just resonates because whenever anyone tries to say, "No, it's all great, it's not hard," parts go, "No, no, no, it is hard. You're not being truthful. It is very hard," right? But then whenever there are parts who are like despairing and saying there's shame and it's terrible and there's no hope, no, no, that's not true either because there's ultimately everything, every part, every one of us is held in unconditional love. It is what makes up the universe. And these are simultaneously true. So I believe that our spirits who choose this path to come into the earth and experience this kind of a life, they know that they're choosing a very difficult school. And who knows, perhaps it's prestigious to get through this incredibly arduous training that is being human, right? But that resonates with me. Yes, it is very hard to go through loss, through pain, through abuse, through all this learning that is learned through trial and suffering, right? So both of those are true, and that just, I mean, I keep saying it over and over again because it just feels like the balance that self knows, the all and. Um, and finally, the last thing I wanted to say is that as I was talking to Brian about making this video and my parts around it, and we were talking about Derek, the whole time I think that we were talking about it, we're in the van, this butterfly came and just stayed and landed on the window on the screen there. And finally Brian said, "Oh, it's Derek." And I mean, yeah, I just said, "Hey, Derek." And then I think it's funny, but it's sweet. I don't know if you've seen the show Shrinking. It's on Apple. It's about therapists, and it's a really great show. But there's a character, the main therapist's neighbor has a husband named Derek, who is just this very good-natured, relaxed, easygoing guy. And there's a line in the show where they continually say, everybody needs a Derek. And so after we got done talking, Brian said, everybody needs a Derek. And I agree. And I think it's incredibly, um, I don't know, my parts want to say ironic, but also beautiful that um, Derek, at the end of his life, I think so rightfully so, um, the divine gave him the message, you have done a good job on this earth and you have a beautiful legacy to leave and you will be an ancestor. And so to me, what's ironic is that I received so much from Derek while he was on this planet and the videos he made, the teaching he did. But ironically, I feel like I'm receiving even more from him now that he's gone beyond the veil and he sees beyond the veil 100% of the time. And I'm able to access his wisdom whenever I would like. And so, oh, I did want to say one last thing is that at the end of the book, he has a incredibly long appendice about all about grief and grieving parts. I don't think it's exactly the same as what's in uh is it Elaborations in Internal Family Systems? There's a book where Derek has written a chapter on grief. I don't think it's the same, but there's some of the same things. But that appendice in and of itself is worth buying Derek's book. If you are going through grief, understanding grief from an IFS perspective, I think is so incredibly valuable. Just being with and loving the parts who are grieving. But in addition to that, understanding that our loved ones who pass beyond the veil and leave this difficult earth school, that we can still connect to them as our ancestors. They can provide us love and wisdom and comfort and knowledge. And it's just such an incredibly valuable gift that when we are able to um, you know, allow our parts that have any concern about it to relax. We can receive messages from ancestors just like we do from parts, right? Um, yeah. So I hope you appreciate uh, that. I did want to share, the parts of me that had activation, just in case maybe you have those as well. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have parts that have activation around other things. And just as an example, that it's okay to be who you are, to have parts that have questions, that have concerns, and you can go to them and you can meet them and you can love them. You cannot get it wrong. There's nothing to fear. You are unconditionally loved. And if you have any questions or comments about this video, please leave them in the comments below.